Hi, welcome everyone. This is ModX Network Voices. My name is Ryan Smith, and I'm joined by Ivan Rupnik. Ivan, like to say hello.
Hey, Ryan.
Thanks for coming again. We have a guest today. Name is Phil Greany. Phil is with Mortenson Construction, and he's going to be talking with us a little bit today about the citizenM projects, in particular in Seattle and Los Angeles. We really thank him for coming and welcome him with us today. He presented at the ModX Northwest event, and we took some folks on a tour of the project there in Seattle. It was very generous of him to do that, and he's agreed again to give more of his time and join us today with a little presentation. Phil, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and go ahead and screen share and talk about the project? That'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan and Ivan. It's great to be here and talk about something I'm very passionate about, which is pushing modular construction in our industry to new levels. And we certainly learned a lot and continue to build with it. So it's fun to share the lessons learned and our experiences. I'll just share my screen here and we'll talk a little bit about citizenM, Gensler and Mortenson's relationship, starting with our first project in Seattle that we did, full volumetric modular. So citizenM Hotels, for those of you who don't know, they're a global hotel company that really caters to the mobile citizen. So they really wanted to disrupt the hotel industry and do things different. So they're kind of born from the frustration of hidden costs, weird rooms, all different, not very functional, and not very nice. So they wanted to create something that was, again, made for the mobile citizen, frequent travelers, business travelers, tech-savvy folks, social, folks, the newer generation, and really make a luxury brand. So what they did pack in their small rooms is really high-end finishes and comfort of what you need and what you don't need. So they really steer away from chocolates on your pillow and fancy pillows or towel art on your bed, and really focus on just the things you need, like great food and drinks, and a space that is highly functional. So this is their typical room. They have one type of room. It's a extra large king bed at the end. It's square, so you can sleep in any direction, depending on if you have one or two people with you. The shower pod on the left and the vanity on the right can act as your bathroom. There's a toilet in there. So really a deconstructed room, very functional. And really they want to make sure they put them in great locations. And the idea is when you travel, as a business traveler and adventurer, your room is your room, and that's where you sleep and shower and brush your teeth. And then the lobby space, they really wanted to create these living room settings. So places to hang out, places to do business, places to meet colleagues and friends, and a place where you can go have a drink, you can have food. They have 24/7 food and drink services. So, they're always open and available. They want these spaces to be full of people and vibrant. And then, like I said earlier, really the location is what they're focused on. They want to put them in major cities around the U.S. And so as they built out their hotels, really modular is just something that they started with based on their experiences in the retail manufacturing business, clothes manufacturing business, and pop-up stores. They saw a real opportunity with their one room type to roll these things out and manufacture them in an environment that's conducive to high quality and just repeated manufacturing. So their goal is to roll out hotels, not have one project at a time. And to do that most efficiently, it was really to manufacture them. So They're not a modular hotel company. They just know the advantages of going with modular for their portfolio. And they only do it where it works. So we're building a hotel right now in Pioneer Square in Seattle, where the site conditions and shape are not conducive to modular. So it's being conventionally built. However, in Seattle, South Lake Union, this rendering here is the new hotel, which is now open. Not the best time to open during a global pandemic, but nonetheless, it's open now. And then we're also building one in LA, which I'll show you here in a little bit. So again, South Lake Union is a collaboration between ARUP on structural and MEP, CPL Civil, Landscape by Site Workshop, and then Gensler and Mortenson and citizenM. So kind of a look at the building in an exploded view, 264 guest rooms, the street level living rooms and citizenM meeting rooms, you can see down there, 84 foot tall. So really just trying to get just under high rise, 6 floors of modular units. So kind of a conventional construction on the core walls for shear and seismic, and our transfer deck, which you can see highlighted there, is a 28-inch thick, mildly reinforced concrete deck. So heavy concrete deck, where then we can stack out what turns out to be 222 modular units to make up the 264 guest rooms. So layout of the building, you can kind of see is essentially a U shape. If you took out this stairwell, or a donut, small courtyard in the middle. These would be double modules here, which is 2 rooms in a corridor in 1 module unit. And then the green ones are the singles. And then we also have our stairwells that are, that one stairwell in particular that is built in with a modular room. So that's a double and a stair combined. So this was our first adventure into full volumetric modular as a company. citizenM had, plenty of experience in Europe, and we're in the middle of stacking out a hotel in New York, all being manufactured by Polcom. Polcom is out of Poland. So we quickly joined forces with them, went to their factory, tried to understand their business so we can start to put together all the details and coordination between our local designers and the Polcom manufacturing designers. So the big thing with modular is really putting together the drawings in a way that we could coordinate with the local AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction, and then also with Washington State L&I. So in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, modular manufacturing is the jurisdiction of the state, and the state here only allows L&I inspectors, or at least at this time could only allow L&I inspectors to be in the factory. So what we had to do was create 2 sets of plans, one for the city of Seattle, SDCI, and one for Washington L&I. So they could see the difference between factory-built modular and the local built components. So in this drawing, you can see that things that are in half tone are those things that are going to be field applied and installed, and the things that are in full tone will be modular components coming from the factory. The other thing that we had to do that was really unique here that hadn't been done by citizenM or Polcom in the past was build these cages and these units to be, to fit in our seismic conditions here in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast. When they built in Europe or on the East Coast, seismic really isn't considered. So they would build the cages very stiff. And the stiff cages were great for transportation and preservation of finishes on the inside. But in Seattle and in these high seismic zones, the cages actually need to be flexible and they need to be able to move in a seismic event. And that caused problems for us with our finishes. We initially put together a cage and that met the seismic requirements, and finished out one unit and drove it on the roads in Poland, which are definitely a good test, pretty bumpy roads, and came back and saw that we had major cracking issues with drywall and finishes because the cages were too flexible. So we ended up putting temporary shipping braces on all the cages to stiffen them up on transport, but then had to cut those in the field once we stacked them to allow for seismic movement. So when you look at this picture of the cage, you can see this X brace here. Gauge metal X brace was only there for transportation. And then once it got to the field in Seattle, we had to cut the straps at the top to unlock the cage to allow for more seismic flexibility. I guess one of the other interesting things with modular, if you haven't done full volumetric modular yet, is really how it's constructed from the inside out. As you can see, the insulation, the wiring, all the finishes are built from the inside, and then completed on the outside when the inside's done. So here we're building their hotel rooms complete. All finishes are complete. This is a shot of that modular unit in the factory. Everything's in: the flooring, the glass shower pod enclosure, the HVAC, all the wallpaper, wall sconces, everything's in except for the mattress in the bed and the TV on the wall. So again, you know, speed, quality, when you're in a factory setting and you're repeating things over and over again at one level, factory floor level, versus climbing up and down a building, it's just much more consistent, and it's easier for us to control the quality. The big thing here, the golden ticket, like I mentioned, is, you know, Washington State L&I inspectors were full-time in the factory, witnessing the installation and the plumbing tests and all that, and really QCing the unit as it was being built. And then final compliance with them is this state of Washington sticker that they put on over the door of each unit, so that when we set them in Seattle, the local inspectors knew that L&I had already inspected inside the rooms, so they didn't enter the rooms. The only thing we did in Seattle was pull the fire alarm wiring, so the fire marshal would go in to see the smoke detector, fire strobe, and fire alarm wiring go in. Other than that, it's all inspected and finished by L&I. So once we had them all complete, it was quite the journey, a long journey from Poland to Seattle. And as you can imagine, we were tracking that ship pretty carefully as it went through the Panama Canal and around up to Seattle to the port of Everett. Here you can see them in the port of Everett starting to unload the units. This is a double modular unit, so you can see the first guest room, the corridor in the middle, and the second guest room. And this is what they look like stacked on the ship. So the ship, almost all the units for the hotel, were shipped at once. Most all of them were shipped and stowed inside the shipping vessel. Several were put on the deck above just because of space inside, but the majority were shipped inside the vessel. So once we got them to the site, really planning the rigging for them is pretty complicated. There was a lot of different configurations, a lot of different harnesses to connect. And this is, you know, on the list of lessons learned. This is one where we've tried to make the rigging configurations and the center of gravity on the units more consistent, because these change out of rigging can take quite a bit of time between modular unit types. So you can see it's pretty elaborate just to get one hooked up. A lot of work goes into it before flying them on the deck and stacking out the units. Here in Seattle, we had to bolt connect the modules together. So what you're seeing here is the top of a modular unit, modular to modular connection. So one row of bolts is one modular unit, the other row of bolts is another modular unit, tying them together so they're kind of lashed together. But these all had to be field drilled and bolted, which was another huge lesson learned for us. You know, one of the things about modular units is how can you make them watertight? And the first thing we did after we stacked them was drill a bunch of holes in them in Seattle, which is not the best plan. So as we've learned lessons here and taken them to LA, you'll see that we've changed that quite a bit. And you can see from this plan, every green rectangle or square is one of those plates filled with bolt holes. So it's quite labor intensive to lay out and drill these plates. We couldn't pre-drill them in the factory because of the high seismic conditions. The bolt holes were not allowed to be slotted, so they had to be really, as built in the field and drilled in the field. So each level, you can imagine 6 levels of all those plates. It's a lot of drilling, a lot of holes in module units, a lot of work. So, we talked a little bit about the benefits of the factory. Not only is it quality, but it's precision. The construction tolerances were really tight and things fit up really well in the field. As they built the cages in the factory, they would use a total station to measure the cages and ensure that they were square and all within 1/8 of an inch overall tolerance from end to end, which is really tight for field construction. So weather protection, fire rating, you could see the joints in between. We had to go through and spray them with fire caulking, stuff them with mineral wool first. You can see the horizontal stuffed, and then the fire caulking follows, just to make sure there's no gaps in between that can draw smoke or flame. So there's Seattle's, the hotel as stacked out. So that's the final stack. And when we got to the roof, we put metal decking down and poured a more conventional concrete roof topping before our insulation and roofing materials went down. So next we went to Los Angeles. So Los Angeles project for citizenM is in the heart of downtown LA. Pretty constrained site. Again, though, really conducive to modular, right? So modular, what we love about full volumetric is it's less disruption to the neighborhood. If you have tight sites that you don't have laydown areas for materials, you're stacking out, in this case, it was 9 floors of modular. There's modular units up here. So 9 floors of modular units that are stacked out by just delivering trucks, right? So really a lot less disruption to the neighborhood, a lot less need for laydown space, and much faster approach. And in this case, this site was very conducive to modular, as it was pretty much a square site. So 11 stories, 315 keys, 9 levels of modular units. We also, and you can see in this exploded view, we've also incorporated some of our MEP rooms up at the roof. We wanted to see what else we could, push to have delivered modularly versus field built. So I think that was a good choice here to kind of add to what we were traditionally doing or learning to do. In this case, though, we did switch manufacturers, and for some of the reasons we talked about before, the lessons learned, the modular units coming from Qualcomm were wrapped in dense glass and then some temporary waterproofing elements. And in this case, we went to China and explored multiple manufacturers with citizenM, probably 8 months in advance of starting the LA project, and really found that CIMC, who is one of the world's largest container manufacturers, also has extensive experience in modular manufacturing and production. As a matter of fact, they have 3 million square feet of factory floor dedicated solely to modular production. So it's in Zhenmen, China. So these pictures you can see are actually our LA modular units in production in one of their 1 million square foot factory floors. So again, similar to what we did with Qualcomm, we want to get everything inside the box, and these boxes are, proven container technology units that not only are weather tight and stand the test of traveling across the ocean on top of big container ships, but they also come with that component of connecting and detaching for transportation and in the field connection. So the same container technology castings used to connect to the ship and to connect to the trucks when delivered are the ones that are used to connect the building in the field. So no drilling of holes. And in this case, this picture you can see at the end here, the window was protected, so there's some steel X-brace on the outside of the container that's covered in plastic just to protect the glass. That's the only reason we have that wrap there. Again, inside the box, these are the units. They're built out, fully built out, everything included, all the finishes. So in the factory, we in this case, the state of California regulates a little differently. They allow for third-party review. So they had a third-party inspection agency in the factory at all times. We, just like we did with Qualcomm, we had Mortenson factory representatives there. So we had folks there that are doing, controlling punch list and making sure that, we're doing first-time quality in these units. So when they deliver, we're not fixing anything. They're 100% punched out. Every little detail is completed and signed off before they leave the factory. So once they arrive on site, we can stack them out just like we did in Seattle, except here, I guess, some similarities is you can see the conventional concrete core in the middle. We have our concrete transfer deck that they all sit on, but in this case, we added the element of steel shear wall braces versus concrete. And what the steel allowed us to do was kind of thin up the space needed for the shear and gave us more room to add modules and add guest rooms. So we maximized the layout by going with this hybrid of concrete and steel to achieve the seismic shear. So next slide here I wanted to show you is that connection. So down in the top is kind of our transfer deck clean, our core done, stripped, ready to go. And then over to the right here, you can see, and maybe I can move this out of the way. You can see that the castings, so the corner castings are the connectors for each unit. So this is the transfer deck. As the unit's set, they lock into that casting, and then there's a bolt as part of that gets threaded in and bolts and assembles them together. So really, the big lessons learned are speed of erection, not drilling holes in the field, maintaining that water tightness throughout so that we don't have water damage that we're going back to repair. And that's really what we've been able to achieve in LA. So quickly, I want to show you just, real time what LA looks like. We're still in the middle of stacking. So I wanted to show you a little video of where we're at. So again, just stripping down to the basic site itself, mat foundation for our core, no basement for citizenM, no parking for citizenM. Most people travel via, rideshare or Uber or something to the site or to the hotel. So no parking required. So traditional mat foundation and concrete core coming up. First level is living room, citizenM. We have a mezzanine level here you can see for mostly back of house, mechanical. And then we get up to our transfer deck, which is again, a mildly reinforced 28-inch thick concrete deck that's going to support the weight of the module units. And then once that's done, you could see that we started to bring up our brace bays here, our shear walls. The steel shear walls are in the north corner and the southeast corner. And now we're ready to start setting our units. So you can see as they start to come in, they're stacking really tight. Again, the tolerances have been excellent. Our corner castings are in the deck there. You can see them. They're all set to receive them. They've been shot in and leveled out so that we know that we're stacking at the right elevation to start so we don't have issues as we go up. And really the goal here was for the team to stack a floor a week. But we knew that we would start out slow and catch up and exceed that floor a week eventually, but on average, we wanted to make sure overall we were at a floor a week, and we're just under that. We're very close to a floor a week of units. And in this case, you can see too, we have stair modules, which are these green ones at the ends, and then the guest room modules, very similar to what we saw in Seattle. As far as the layout, again, that's the nice thing about citizenM is they have one room type besides ADA, which is a requirement, right? Otherwise, it's just one room type repeated over and over again. So really the goal was a rollout, and you can see citizenM is pretty aggressive in their rollout. When we started working with them, they had just moved into North America. So they only have hotels open in New York and Boston, and now one in Seattle. But you can see their plans are pretty aggressive and significant. And so I think we're getting closer to being in rollout mode with them, where we're repeating things over and over again, so that we can get faster and better. To reduce the time of construction and design for them is a big deal. Really taking the 80% of the building, which is the module components, and standardizing them so that you're only recreating the other 20% in the custom lobbies or some of the mechanical spaces. That is the goal of the team, really to fit Lego parts together. And not follow the traditional approach where every individual project is a new project, an individual project. It's how can we repeat things over and over again and truly roll them out, and look at really how our teams function too. I think in traditional approach, there's scope issues. There's this very linear process, and there's there's limited trust between the architect, the owner, and the contractor. And so what we really wanted to do, and what citizenM wants to do, is take a look at the Toyotas, the Apples, the Sonys of the world, and create this integrated team where we're really focused on process and rollout, and how we can manage the supply chain and get better together. And a big part of that is, the design focus, and this whole speed to revenue for citizenM is where they see the value besides the quality. And so with the traditional method, you're permitting and bidding and going out for procurement and submittals and constructing all in kind of this linear fashion. Whereas with modular process, we're bringing that whole process forward. And I would say that's one of the things that, is different for design teams and us, and you got to be cognizant of, is that, you're really doing things in advance and doing some things that you traditionally wouldn't at the same time, especially for the designer. They're in the middle of CA and fabrication of all the hotel units at the same time we're finalizing design and permitting for, some of the public spaces. So really that team that traditionally would design, get permits, and then go into CA, construction management, now has to fulfill both roles at the same time. So they have to have the right team. So again, the big factors is, the increased speed to market. So for citizenM being an owner, operator of their hotels and their brand, speed to market is everything for them. So the faster we can deliver a project modularly, the faster they start gaining revenue. And then also reduce cost and risk. Building modular really helps with the shortage of skilled labor that we're all seeing around the country, especially in Seattle. You have people on the factory floor that are repeating things over and over again versus bringing new people to the site every day, trying to weed through those who actually know what they're doing and those who don't. And then the reduction in waste. So overall, the more you can bring this into a factory environment, the more you can get things, pieces and parts precisely cut or precisely manufactured, so you're not cutting and throwing a lot of waste away. Now, I will say the one, environmentally not so friendly thing is probably transporting them around the world. We want to, and we've really been looking to promote more of this in the US, where we can manufacture here, travel by rail car to the cities, and reduce that footprint, environmental footprint on shipping and transportation. So really, that's what I got. It's kind of a high-level, quick overview of our journey with citizenM. I would say, it takes an owner like them who are very forward-thinking, understand the power of teams and what people with a common passion for trying something different, not being afraid to do something different, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible when it comes to our old traditional methods of construction is very refreshing, and it's great. You have to have a partner like citizenM or Gensler that are all in. If people aren't all in on it, it's really hard to get there. So with that, any questions?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for the deep dive, actually, for really actually a lot of content and a lot of candidness, which we try to encourage in our own research too, is that I think for us to move forward, we need to identify our obstacles as well as our successes. And so I think, on the one hand, you guys have put together a really unique team and relationships between yourself, owner operator, and also with Gensler. And so you're generating some real knowledge. But maybe stepping back a little bit, we've also in our research noticed some persistent obstacles to the growth of the market penetration, particularly in the US. And so two that you brought up, and you just brought it up, one is the capacity capability of US manufacturers. And so, so maybe just speak a little bit to that. I mean, is it what makes Poland, because with China we expect, but Poland and China delivered a product for you with some, with some obstacles, but in a way that you weren't able to. I'm sure you would have liked to, and if for many reasons have had a U.S. manufacturer. What do you see as keeping it particularly at this, steel mid to high rise? What's keeping us in the U.S. from, expanding? I mean, you want a modular product from manufacturers, but you're not finding it. We've seen that with other innovative teams where it's just not there. What do you think is preventing that?
Yeah, I think just in general, if you look around at energy codes or new types of construction techniques, the U.S. is always behind compared to Europe and other places. And so long before, anybody here got on board with modular, Europe has been, and Australia has been doing it for such a long time. And so there was that demand and growth there that, and that's where some of these manufacturers were born. So I just think that, globally we're behind in any innovation. And so It just takes us longer. We're just starting to get there and ramp up like they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. The other challenge is just consistency of code, right, across the board. When you look at the map of the U.S. and you look at each jurisdiction, it's all new, or they do things differently. So it's not as easy. I think you guys have explored Japan, who does it really well, and how there was kind of some uniformity across different regions there to make sure that they were all driven by one code or one to help really assemble how do you do modular. And so I think for developers, that's really scary and challenging, right? It's they don't know what they're getting into, and will what I do here work in another market? Is it, so it takes somebody like citizenM to come into the U.S. and say, I've had tons of success in Europe with this. We know what we're doing. We're gonna work through it. We're committed to that. So.
Right, and I think it's well. So you answered also what I was going to be my second question, which is the other obstacle you alluded to in the beginning of the presentation, which is the honestly ridiculous situations you find yourself in with regulations, where you're having to make two different sets for what is actually, it's not only a financially viable project, it's one that's generating knowledge for us to solve our real, not just economic but social issues in the U.S. And so it's really frustrating. That's why, what we're trying to do, and that's one of the main things about these ModX voices is, not just to feature the solutions, but also identify problems, because why doesn't the U.S. want to increase manufacturing? And here's an example. Why don't we want to create jobs in inner cities? Why don't we want to create a regulatory framework, not only that helps modular, but one that's clear for everybody, one that makes more sense? It's not that modular needs a new regulatory framework. It's that construction needs a new regulatory framework.
Right.
And so, do you feel like, let's say regulation, capacity, capability, what are other things you see? You guys have built a kind of fairly vertically integrated solution within the limits that we have. Are there other obstacles that, those are things we should work on and you can't solve? Like we need to get to this, Phil Greany, you can't solve them without others, right? Regulatory and those factories. Are there other things that you can identify that we need to solve in the U.S. to move this forward?
Yeah, well, I do think, just going back to our experience with in Seattle with the state of Washington and California, I do appreciate how they worked together. So Washington, LNI, and City of Seattle were really on board with modular, and that helped us, right? We met early and often with them. They were excited about it. And they saw in citizenM that they knew what they were talking about and had some experience. When we went to LA, there was some jurisdictional conflict between the city of Los Angeles and the state. But what they did was, and what we encouraged them to do, was talk to, the folks, their counterparts up here in Seattle and with the state of Washington, and they did, and that helped them get over those hurdles. So the more we can connect jurisdictional folks together to hear the experiences and understand, I think it's a lot of just understanding. They're scared of the unknown and used to doing the same thing over and over again. So if they can hear from their counterparts some successful stories, I think that certainly helps. The other thing, the challenges we had were just materials. And so again, material standards in the US, ASTMs and other, code-driven material standards. We're in a global economy, and so we need to be able to source, if we're going to manufacture well in the US, we need to be able to source globally, just like Boeing does with the Dreamliner, right? We need to, and so I think there's some barriers there on material standards and global sourcing that we need to break through. Certainly, some of the materials could come more effectively from a global source and be more cost effective than finding everything that's produced in the U.S. So manufacturers would be more successful in the U.S. if they had a more global reach on resources and materials.
Phil, could you talk a little bit about, it's all really wonderful and very informative. Talk a little bit about your partnership with Gensler, and a couple things, like what does the contract look like? Because there's a lot of knowledge sharing right from the beginning that goes on, and you seem to be also developing that knowledge. So the contract structure, how that works, and then the knowledge that is produced during the project and those lessons. Is there IP wrapped around that? Do you share that, or is that citizenM that owns it and it just builds upon each other in project to project? How is that codified? How do you keep that data so those lessons aren't lost, right, in some individual's mind when they move jobs or something, which we know happens in construction. So just some things about the team, the contract, and the knowledge.
Yeah, so the interesting part, our contract, the structure has changed over time. And, everybody comes into it with, a different lens on things and caution. And so for us, I think from the beginning, citizenM would have loved us just to be a full design builder and really turnkey for them. We weren't comfortable with that, given the fact that we didn't have the knowledge around this. And so, our first project that we did in Seattle and our LA project are pretty traditional, where, the designers work for citizenM and we work for citizenM. But we really treat it like, and I think that's one of the things early on that, it's more the business terms that we put together and the commitments we made as a team, is that we function as a design build project team and integrated team, even though our contracts don't say that. But now we've shifted to, we're looking at another project for them in California where we're moving towards, and we feel comfortable being the design builder. So ultimately that's what citizenM wants. Now that we know their business, we know modular, we have great experience with manufacturers that we're comfortable with. We want to move into more of the design build role where, we can really control things from start to finish, and citizenM can, kind of sit back, and let us do our thing with Gensler, other design partners, because in their mind, they want to facilitate a rollout of multiple hotels, but their resources are limited and they don't want to be the ones slowing down the progress and what we do best. So knowing their brand with Gensler, knowing their brand, us knowing their brand, what's important and how to build it, just made sense to move into the design build approach. So then you also asked about IP. That's one of the great things is, I would say the only IP that we've ran into really is from the manufacturers. So manufacturers like to control their IP more than the Genslers or the citizenMs. I would say citizenM is almost like Tesla in a way. citizenM would like to share this experience, and that's how we feel too. We want to make people successful and really push the industry into doing more modular, because there's such an advantage to it, and we are such an industry that hasn't changed in hundreds of years. It's time for change, and the way to do that is to share the knowledge. So the little bit of IP that we've run into has really been from the manufacturing side, but it hasn't been a big push. I think people are open to share and kind of state their claim and their experience in the industry without worrying about, their secret sauce getting out there, because just like what you guys are doing, the more of this we do, the better we'll be at building these buildings the right way through manufacturing and quality, controls. So really no IP issues that we have or we've seen.
Yeah.
Phil, can you just alluded to a point it's very interesting for us, and we've seen successful places like Japan. When you were approached to by citizenM, and you and citizenM seemed to understand that this is going to be a long haul, that there's going to be some, was there actual budgeting in place for saying, the Seattle project is going to be more expensive because we don't know, quote unquote, we don't quite have it figured out yet? How conscious was that? Was that built into the business model? Was that built into the contract? How formal was that very humble and very important step in the process that says, the only way we're going to learn how to do this is by doing it, and we're not, and the returns we're not going to see until we do project 2 or 3 or maybe more.
Sure. Yeah, we knew it was an investment on our side, but I will say, going into it, we wanted to make sure we protected ourselves as well and not take on too much risk and make bad decisions. So, citizenM brought Qualcomm, who they had used on multiple projects, and and really, you know, contractually on this first one with Qualcomm, they were supplying and installing it for us, which, you know, if you break down every other component of the project, they're more traditional methods of construction, and we were fine with that. So our biggest hesitation going into it was working with a foreign entity who really, they have, you know, maybe a U.S. shell company that doesn't mean much. And so, you know, we did put contractual measures in place to say, okay, what if, you know, something happens and the factory closes down in Poland, or, you know, there's political unrest or something, or what happens if your ship, you know, sinks halfway across the Atlantic Ocean? What does all that mean, and who takes on that responsibility? And again, it's somebody like citizenM who you need it, you know, that has done this before. They're aware that they need to take on those risks. Same goes for, you know, the way we do business with them now. When they take on the risk until it lands on U.S. soil. But now we've moved to where we're installing them ourselves. We know how to install them. We're comfortable with that. It's really just those unknown. And again, another good reason to promote more U.S. modular manufacturing, where we're not worried about them, you know, traveling thousands of miles over water, or, you know, we can go visit the factory anytime. It's easy. It's, you know, a state away, not halfway around the world. So.
Phil, want to thank you for joining us here on LOTX Network Voices and giving your time and sharing in a very transparent way your lessons learned on these projects. And we hope to be able to take folks to another one of your projects in the future. With that, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.